Hello and welcome to the Capital Gains Tax Solutions podcast, where we believe most high net worth individuals and those who help them, they struggle with clarifying their capital gains tax deferral options. Not having a clear plan is the enemy, and using a proven tax deferral strategy, such as the Deferred Sales Trust, is the best way for you to sell highly appreciated cryptocurrency, businesses, real estate, public or private stock. Save a failed 1031 exchange so you can defer millions of dollars of capital gains tax and create and preserve more wealth. Hey, I'm your host, Brett Swarts. In each episode, I'm joined by some of the best real estate, financial, wealth, and sometimes metal minds in the world, which is kind of a good ring to it. So we can make complex tax deferral strategies simple and passive income plans achievable. I'm excited about our next guest. He's out of the great state of Texas originally and is now in Canada. And he is an experienced CEO with a demonstrated history of working in the mining and metals industry. He has over 10 years of experience in natural resources and financial markets, previously with Brazil Resources, Inc., Uranium Energy Corp., and U.S. Global Investors. He's a graduate of Texas Tech University, and he is going to help us learn how to start making more money in the metals industry, such as gold, silver, copper, zinc, a couple others. Please welcome show with me, Max Porterfield. Hey, Max, how you doing?
I'm doing great. Excited to be here. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. And for our listeners getting to know you for the first time, would you give us a little bit more about your story and your current focus?
Again, I'm born and raised in Texas, immigrated to Canada in 2019, and I head up Calinex Mines, where I'm president and CEO, as you mentioned. And we're focused on driving long-term wealth creation through the discovery of base and precious metals-rich deposits in known Canadian mining jurisdictions where there's immediate need. So again, there's three phases in the metals business: the exploration, development, and production. And we sit in the exploration phase, which is the most exciting part of the business, in my opinion.
Fantastic. And I love the fact that you're Texas to Canadian. We'll talk about that here in a little bit. And by the way, you can learn more about Max Porterfield at calinex.ca. That's CALLINEX.ca, not .com. Some person got that already, so make sure it's .ca. And again, we're going to be talking about how to make money in the metals industry. But before we go there, Max, I want to take one other step back. I want to go back maybe to the Texas Tech University days. Maybe it's Texas high school days, right? I believe we've all been given certain gifts in this life, and these gifts have been given to us to be a blessing and help to others. Some people call them strengths, some people call them superpowers. But I'm curious, what are those one or two gifts that you believe you were given, and how does that help how you help and bless people today?
Oh, well, that's actually a super interesting question. And often, actually, honestly, I don't think I've ever had a question quite like it, so I appreciate that. I think oftentimes people in life do have their gifts, and other times some realize them sooner than others. I think I do have the gift of intuition and foresight. And those are two very, very key gifts that I don't think people probably resonate with as much now. And I think maybe that will shift more so going in the future. But gut instinct and following my intuition has always led me in the right way in any part of life. And then being a visionary and the really, I think, the gift of seeing what's to come. Big macro trends, I've been very, very blessed to being right on the call. And that creates a lot of opportunities when you're able to really put to rest a lot of the noise and then go inward and listen to yourself and which you believe is to be right and the right path forward.
Excellent. So intuition, foresight, being able to have vision for big macro trends, seeing things and having a good instinct for those things, whether it be investment or different parts of life. Is that a fair summary so far?
Yeah, I think oftentimes when you get into a situation, I think a good example of that is most life is fear-based. I hate to say it, but a lot of people live life in a fear-based mindset. And when you live life in a fear-based mindset, you're going to make decisions based upon fear, right? The whole fight or flight mentality. Whereas when you're not, so much living in that fear and not, let fear necessarily dictate your life, then I think that opens the door to much bigger opportunities. For example, when the zinc market, was at decade lows, zinc prices were below $1. They were down to sub 70-cent zinc. And then everybody in the market was fearing that Glencore was going to go bankrupt. Glencore is one of the largest zinc producers in the world. My gut told me the complete opposite, and more like Buffett. You want to be greedy when others are fearful. And that was a tremendous opportunity. And we went out there and we diversified the portfolio and acquired some zinc-based assets at the bottom of the zinc cycle at pennies on the dollar. So again, it's seeing these macro trends, seeing what's going on in mine supply, and not being dissuaded by any short-term, more speculation or sensationalism that's driven by media and the world as a whole. I think another good example of that is, when the bottom marked out, the peak fear during this COVID thing was around March 2020. And I personally went all in March 2020 with the cash that I had because, again, I didn't think that the world was, this wasn't the bubonic plague in terms of the COVID scenario, and that, things have been oversold. So using that instinct, that intuition, and foresight to guide decisions, whether investing decisions for personal standpoint or investment decisions and management decisions with Calinex, trusting that has always been very, very good to me. And quite honestly, anytime I've fallen into that fear trap, it hasn't ended so well. So that's why I say that.
Very well said. I really appreciate that. Makes a whole lot of sense. And so it's not letting fear, control or dictate your decisions, but it's trying to. And I imagine there is emotion involved, right? But how do you practice, having certainty of conviction with certain, investments and things that you have versus that emotion, whether it be a high or a low, a high of exuberance, right? Of there's the sky's not going to fall, or the bottom of, hey, the fear base. Like, what is it that you practice to help to keep your mind and your emotions clear?
Well, I mean, Kaylee, I think I was going to get on any of these kind of conversations today, but I'm happy to do so. But what I do is I meditate. I think that it's not as appreciated in the modern context, certainly in the Western world, on calming the mind. Again, that's when you're living in a fear-based mindset, and your subconscious mind really overrules that, because your subconscious mind is driven by your past. So it's something that occurred in your childhood, ideas that are drilled into you as a child or in your schooling. And if you look at the exploration business, right when you enter the exploration business, it's fear-based. They tell you, oh, the statistical odds of finding a mine are 1 in 4,000. So I view the world a little bit differently than the average person, I think. So I think meditation is key to calming the mind and bringing yourself into a present state. And I also think meditation is key into reprogramming your subconscious mind. And when you do that, incredible things can happen. And I do believe that you have to have a positive mindset to have a positive outcome. Having an inherent negative mindset will draw negative outcomes. So again, if you don't believe you're going to succeed, then you're not going to succeed. I think Steve Jobs said it as well. The only people that are going to change the world are the people crazy enough to believe that they can change the world. And if you look at Steve Jobs, you look at Robert Friedland, who's a billionaire in mining, the founder of Salesforce, the one common theme is they all turned to a meditation before they had their big breakthrough moment. And certainly that was my case, where I picked up that, and it's helped me tremendously. It's not related so much to typical questions I get asked, but that's the truth behind the question.
Yeah, but it really is related, right? Because it all starts with our minds and our emotions, right? And where we're at there to make good decisions. And so I really appreciate you sharing that and diving into some of the background there, because that helps us understand how you have.
Well, not to interject, if you consider the fact that we're all made up of energy, right? We're all the table I'm touching, the seat that I'm touching is all energy. And, and through meditation, it's actually been proven that your body, you carry around an electromagnetic field. It's similar when someone walks into a room that has a very magnetic personality or energy, you can instantly tell that. I mean, that's what politicians are really great for, known to having that gift. But the same thing can be said if you walk by someone that has a very, very negative energy. You can feel that. You're like, oh, that person's got a bad attitude, negative energy. And so if you realize that you're putting that energy out in one form or another, you're going to attract the opposite to that. And if you look at a very simplistic standpoint for base metals exploration, we use electromagnetics to find metals. So it's all very, I find similarities to mental health and the world in terms of meditation, as well as to how you actually find mines, because it's electromagnetic fields. and you use that in one form or another, whether you're sending messages over, the waves, you're reprogramming your subconscious mind, or you're looking for minds. EM fields seem to be across the board very, very similar.
Very fascinating. In our most of our listeners are commercial real estate, cryptocurrency, and business owners, right? And ultra high net worth folks, or folks that are even just building their professional practice and helping others build wealth. And we don't have a lot of folks that are on the metal part of it, right? And so let's dive right into some of those things. But besides having your mindset right, and besides not letting fear drive you, what's the next secret or step to investing and getting and be able to build wealth with gold or copper, zinc? Walk us through just kind of the basics here.
Well, I mean, first of all, you have to put yourself on a path of resource growth. I mean, that's what's going to drive shareholder appreciation, and that's what wealth creation in this can happen so quickly, because it's very, very hard to find a base metals mine, or any kind of mine for that matter. That's why they're so valuable when you do find them. And the key thing is, my mindset is you need to reduce risk. I mean, it's a very, very high risk inherently in exploration. We're very similar to a biotech business where you're doing a lot of research and development, but instead of curing cancer or any kind of disease, we're looking to make a discovery in a virgin area, greenfield exploration, so to speak. So the way we mitigate risks is going in a tier 1 jurisdiction. For example, we're not looking to explore in a very risky jurisdiction like Central Africa. Central Africa and the DRC is known to having some of the highest grade copper mines in the world, but it comes with a huge geopolitical risk. So we focus our portfolio in Flin Flon, Manitoba, is where we have this big discovery. It took a number of years to make, but again, it's right outside of a town called Flin Flon. So you're in a tier 1 jurisdiction. We have rule of law in Canada. And then again, we're not looking for remote. Remote is big upfront costs. In terms of exploration costs are going to be much higher when you're going to have to helicopter people, the drills, the fuel to these remote locations. And then on the flip side of that, when you make a discovery, which is hard enough to do as is, to make a discovery that's economic when you're remote, you have much higher hurdles, because oftentimes these remote discoveries have upfront capital costs, $500, $700 billion capex. So again, we're looking for discoveries within proximity to infrastructure, where it's going to be upfront, much lower capital costs to do the exploration. You're in an area where you have geologic pedigree. So again, it's when you found one mine, it's much easier to find another. So in the case of Flin Flon, you have all that. You have the infrastructure, you have the people, and right now you've got a finite timeline where they need a new discovery. So you have the community support, you have policyholder support behind you to fast track from a discovery to a production type of scenario. So that's how we look to mitigate risk in a very high risk environment that's inherent in the exploration business of mining.
Really fascinating. And I'm thinking like an apartment complex, you have a net operating income, right? You have the management, and you have utilities, and you have repairs and maintenance, and you have CapEx, and you have, all of these things, reserves. I mean, it's the same thing. It's a business model. And what you're saying is the key here is making sure that you're going into it with success on the exit as well as on the management of it. Because even if you find something, remote place, if you find it, the ability to get it out and to actually be able to make sense on the numbers to exit it is every little nook and cranny has to be considered, right? Or if like the Rubik's Cube.
Right. And not to interject, so in terms of, if you look at the most successful people in the mining business, most successful people probably in real estate, I could give you a real estate analogy just as easy. But if you don't know who you're going to sell it to before you go out and do it, it's like you don't know your customer, right? If you go into a housing, if you want to be a housing redeveloper, you want to go into an area that you see is going to be favorable. One of the most successful trades I ever had was when right out of college during the financial crisis. My dad's like, "When are you going to move out?" I was like, "Oh, I better go buy a place." And so I ended up buying a place, but it was the most hated area at the time. It was people said it was, the most risk, you'd say, because it was being re-gentrified. We'll put it that way. It wasn't a very favorable place to live. But my view in terms of that, in terms of real estate, you want to put yourself to proximity. And my proximity was to the urban environment. I felt that the trek that all these homeowners were having, living in more suburban areas, is taking a toll on people. I think as empty nesters came around, they wanted to urbanize and kind of go where they can have more of an urban type of feel. And so with that being said, I made one of my first investments in San Antonio was in a historic neighborhood that just got deemed historic a couple years later. It was within a mile of the Alamo, but it was unfavorable. But I saw the transition to come. And the same thing in terms of mining and exploration. If you look in the base metals weren't exciting to explore for when I started Calinex or took over Calinex in 2014. It was, the bottom of the cycle, and you want to enter a cycle in a cyclical environment at the bottom, and you want to exit at the top. Just like you want to buy a stock at the bottom, you want to exit at the top. And the base metal markets, the metal markets in general, are cyclical, and you want to look to position yourself for the exit. And you want to do that where you kind of have your end buyer in mind and your access to market in mind. So that's kind of how we looked at building Calinex, just like I would look to build any business outside of mining as well.
Excellent. So talk us a little bit more about Calinex and kind of the vision and where you guys are at, and tell us maybe about you tell us a little bit about that one mine you were talking about. You mentioned it. I forgot the name of the place, but just kind of give us the operations and the overview of Calinex, what it does, and then mention too. I think you said it trades on the New York Stock Exchange or maybe NASDAQ or somewhere. Would you just kind of give us that and how, if someone wants to, like, hey, I'm digging this, I want to dive in more, take the next step to be an investor or something else. Could you talk to us a little bit about that?
Yeah, certainly. So first things first, we trade on the Toronto Venture Exchange under the ticker CNX. We also trade in the U.S. under the OTC under the ticker CLLXF. So that's typical for exploration companies like ourselves. And in terms of the company's portfolio, so we have a deep portfolio. The portfolio has been built, again, proximity infrastructure. And I'll just touch on the stuff in Eastern Canada. Again, we acquired these assets at the bottom of the zinc cycle. One of them is a near surface, amenable to an open pit based upon a preliminary economic assessment we did. It's a zinc lead deposit that's just right off a provincial highway, 25 kilometers away from a deep water port, power station, rail line that gives you direct access to market. And then you have a high unemployment rate in that community. And then also in the Buckens district of Newfoundland, we have just announced a sizable near surface pit constrained gold, copper, zinc resource. So again, those assets are already in the portfolio. They've been drilled out and really a backstop to the valuation that you see today. And then in terms of our discovery, we've had a long-term view. I mean, when I took over Calinex in 2014, I built a technical team around me that has done it before and looked to do it again, with a long-term view that the mine at Flin Flon, the 777 mine, was going to be end of its mine life when we said that in 2014. So again, our technical team has been built and been credited with the discovery of 3 of the 4 largest mines in Flin Flon's history. That's been a camp that's taken 26 mines in the immediate town. They are into production, and 777's due to shut down next May. So again, 777 due to shut down next May. That's 785 jobs in a town of 5,500 people that are forecasting to go down to 50 by 2023. So the town is got its back against the wall, so to speak. It's not the first time. So we're not living in a state of fear in that. We do believe that we can change that based upon what we've discovered at Rainbow. Our Rainbow discovery is less than 30-minute drive from Flin Flon by existing all-weather road. You can literally drive up to the property. The discovery actually sits within a mineral lease, so it has advanced permitting. In terms of hydroelectric power, it's clean power. Within 200 meters is a high-voltage hydroelectric power line. There's a historic shaft within 500 meters. And when we've been made that discovery last August, it's shaping up to be one of the top 10 highest grade copper discoveries on the planet. To give you an idea, the average grade of copper mined on the planet right now is 0.5%. To be in the top 10 highest grade copper mines in the world, and they, predominantly 7 out of 10 of them being in Central Africa, you need to be over 3.75% copper. By and large, the copper intercepts that we've announced outside of in Rainbow has been over 4% copper, and also carries gold, silver, and zinc as byproducts. We've now delineated the resource. We've just given an update. We've drilled up within 100 meters of surface. which is much more shallow than our initial discovery hole of 900 meters vertical depth. And so we're building tonnage there. So we're building tonnage of a very, very high-grade copper that has the potential to be powered by a clean, low-cost power at a really critical time as the world shifts away from the hydrocarbons and oil and gas and electric vehicles. So that's why you have copper, trading near all-time highs right now. So we've, an opportunity here with Rainbow as we delineate it to save a town, to provide throughput at a very critical time for this community, but also at a very, very critical time for the global markets in North America in particular, as the world looks to shift away from hydrocarbons onto base metals. And we have an opportunity not only to provide potential production, but to do that in the cleanest way possible, because it is the highest grade with the lowest cost, cleanest power source out there, which will ultimately make it, when we build size, put economics around that, one of the cleanest copper concentrates to be produced in the world. And that's
Phenomenal.
what the business is onto. That's what we're onto, and that's why I'm so passionate, excited about our company.
That's amazing. Wow. That's like you could write like maybe a book or two on on all of that, right?
I like a movie too. So
yeah, exactly. That's really, really fascinating. Right. Yeah. A movie script, right? With the town and everything else. And I mean, that's really, really neat. I'm curious on returns, and I'm not sure if you're allowed to even talk about returns, right? So I want to make sure we be careful about that with certain things. But I mean, in real estate, right? Commercial real estate, people are at 6, 7, 8%, maybe 9%. That's really good. And then in IRRs of 15 to 17 over maybe a 3 to 5 year period, depending on the level of risk and it's the development of a property, or if it's just a value add property, or a lot of different moving factors there. People are borrowing at 3 to 4%, leveraging up, get the depreciation. But anything as far as the returns that you can kind of talk about to kind of give our audience away. Cryptocurrency, we have clients that have, invested 50,000, went to $50 million over 7, crazy, Bitcoin, Ethereum type of stuff. And they're selling and they're diversifying with our strategy and going into diversifying, really wanting to go into different things that are more stable. So, but what can you just tell about overall investment returns and what someone could be looking for if they're interested?
Yeah. So again, in this business is where you can create the most amount of wealth for yourself and your shareholders. In my position, obviously, I am a very large shareholder myself, and my family collectively own 15% of Calinex. So this is obviously my big focus in way we're going to build wealth for myself and my family. But with that being said, I mean, if you look at Calinex and the valuation, when the metals were out of favor and it was pre-discovery at Pine Bay, we got as low as a $3.5 million market cap, which we were trading less than cash at one point there. And then at some point, we've had big returns. I think we were up over 10 times from the bottom to our peak earlier this year. So you can create a lot of wealth in a very short period of time on a discovery. And now is a very unique time because the market's kind of been off over the past 4 months. The share price has lagged, but that's not driven by fundamentals in terms of what we've discovered. And so I think this is very early on, because we de-risk the discovery, which is real key. We hit the discovery, which you saw a big revaluation, but as we delineate the discovery and the world can see what we are and we check the boxes, so to speak, that's when we can drive even higher share price appreciation. So equity valuation today of sub 30 million, while we've had a big upside historically, we're really just at the beginning, because some of these discoveries can ultimately go on to get taken out for billions of dollars, depending on how big they are, right? And so we've got to show size and scale with Rainbow, and we're very early on in doing that. And we're currently today trading at the same valuation when we only had 3 holes into the discovery. So I think that's a really big opportunity, is during tax loss selling, realizing you're buying a company that's done a tremendous amount of de-risking since its initial discovery holes that were discovered last year, due to forces that are outside the fundamentals of the company, so to speak, with a big pipeline of news flow to come. And I think is a tremendous opportunity in the shorter term. And I think longer term, as we delineate the resource, we put ourselves in a really unique position to create a lot of value for ourselves and to meet the needs of the community.
That's awesome. I really like it. I'm really fascinated, and I've never personally invested in metals just because it hasn't been. I haven't known someone like yourself, right, or gotten connected with it. So I think it's really neat. I think your audience is going to appreciate the opportunity to learn more about Max Porterfield by going to callinex.ca. That's callinex.ca, CALLINEX.ca. That being said, I want to shift a little bit to capital gains tax briefly, and then we'll go into our lightning round since we're running out of time here. So, you're from Texas, right? I'm from California. Texas, historically and really forever, has had better tax laws than California, right? A lot of the major companies are moving out of California to Texas, right? And people are frustrated with capital gains tax when they go to sell their public stock, private stock. It could be anything that's subject to U.S. capital gains tax, cryptocurrency. It could be precious metals. It could be artwork, collectibles, real estate. So I'm just curious, like being that you're on kind of both sides of Texas and Canada now as a dual citizen, what's been your biggest frustration as it pertains to capital gains tax and or deferral when you go to want to exit at a high spot?
Well, candidly, I'm in a unique situation because I am actually a dual citizen of both countries now. And I can tell you that one of the most frustrating things about being an expat is the US government's the only government in the world that taxes you based on your global income. And so, really, I'm in a position because of that, that I can't shelter a lot of my wealth in the same way that the average person can, because I'm not, as a U.S. citizen living in Canada, I cannot invest in the equivalent of a Roth IRA in Canada because of the way that the U.S. government looks at that as a foreign trust. So I'm limited to that. And at the end of the day, if I'm in a situation where I can limit my tax exposure in Canada, I then have to pay the United States government. So I pay an exceptional amount of tax. Do I think it's fair? Not necessarily so. But at the end of the day, I do realize that that's part of life. So in terms of my own bone to pick is paying the highest prevailing tax rate and then become a Canadian citizen if I decide to move. Now I get an exit tax, right? Which is, trust me, you get an exit tax as a U.S. citizen as well. I just in a different financial position because I immigrated to Canada when I was 26 or 27 or so, and now I'm 37, so I'm in a different financial situation. So again, I think being an expat is very obviously great being an American, but I think treating all Americans as tax mules when you leave the country, not necessarily to evade taxes, but to just change your life. I don't necessarily agree with, candidly. And now, if you look to renounce a U.S. citizen, they'll chase you for 7 years after, just as a kind of a foresight. You continue to file after 7 years, and you pay the exit tax. So that's just been my own situation, and I know my situation is very unique.
Yeah, no, thanks for sharing that. I appreciate that. That's kind of it's good to know about. The other one that's kind of interesting too is foreign nationals who are investing in U.S. investments and are subject to capital gains tax and or build up their wealth inside of the U.S. It's only a $60,000 exclusion on the death tax, which is really fascinating. If you're married and you're an American citizen, it's 22 million married right now, 12 million single. But anything above and beyond that gets hit with a 40% death tax. That's nothing to do with a stepped up basis. And if you're a foreign national, it's even worse. You only have $60,000. So let's just imagine you're a foreign national and you invested in the United States for 50 years and you built your net worth up to $100 million inside of the U.S. And if it's inside the taxable estate, your exclusion as not a U.S. citizen is going to be $60,000, which means $40 million. The day you die after 6 months is owed to the U.S. You're like, wait, what? Whereas if you can get it outside your taxable estate and or do some estate tax planning, right? You can defer that or even potentially eliminate some of that with proper planning. That's part of what we're here to help people do. If anyone's interested in how to do that, you can go to capitalgainstaxsolutions.com and we can talk about the Deferred Sales Trust and how we're able to do that. That being said, are you ready for the lightning round?
Yeah, let's do it.
All right. Knowing what you know now, Max, if you go back to your 25-year-old self, what's the one golden nugget you tell yourself to do?
Trust myself and trust my intuition.
Perfect. Question number 2, what's the number one book you've recommended the most in the past year?
That would be Joe Dispenza, Breaking the Habit of Being Yourself. That's a book really on a scientific approach or basis when you meditate, what that does to your brain on a scientific level, and your brain waves to get yourself in a suggestible state. And candidly, I owe a lot of the success that I have because of meditating. Not necessarily the book itself, but I was already learning to meditate through a guide that I had, so to speak. And it was the best thing that ever happened to me. And I'm a guy that inherently likes to help people, as you can probably tell. So if I ever see anybody that can benefit in one way or another, I'm open to share. And certainly, I think, again, mental health, particularly now with everything going on in the world, has benefited me dramatically. And that would be the book that would kind of break it down in simple terms, with more of a scientific approach to the process.
Beautiful. Love that. Breaking the habit of being yourself. Question number 3. What are you most curious about right now?
And I'm sorry, I would say up until that point, 2019, if you'd asked me at 30 when I became CEO of Calinex, what drives me, I would have told you the fear of failure. Right?
Okay.
And as I mentioned before, I don't live in that state of failure anymore, or that idea. So I'm driven by a different mindset, right? And that's, again, I think can be owed to that.
That's beautiful. That's a great transformation. Thank you for sharing that. And so next question, what are you most curious about right now?
What I'm most curious about right now is how they're going to think about unwinding this debt that the globe's got themselves into. It's very, very concerning. I believe they're going to inflate out of it. I think the only way is to inflate out of that. And obviously capital preservation and mitigating taxes is one thing, but you've got to basically gain the inflation rate at this point. And really, I think watching that, I really think that we're reliving a period of time not dissimilar to the early 1960s through to the 1980s, where you have a lot of the world, space exploration was big at the time. The U.S. got itself off the gold standard at that time. You had the advent of the Cold War, which I think was repercolating with a different foe right now. As opposed to maybe the Russians, we now have the Chinese to pick a bone with, the oil and gas markets, the different rights movements that are very particular right now. I see that it really is a repeat as we kind of go through that process right now, and you can learn a lot about history and how to position yourself, and that's candidly why I feel like I'm exceptionally positioned in what's going on right now. Government spending, infrastructure spending. I'm really watching all those things, and I think we're in a perfect storm here for a big rise. But looking out into the future, I am obviously looking for any kind of, I don't want to say dangers, but anything on the horizon that can derail that.
That's fantastic, Max. Hey, we're out of time. And so for our listeners who want to get in touch with you, what's the best place? Would you mind one last time? What's the best place for them to connect with you or the company?
Well, definitely on our website at calinex.ca. You can get our contact information, all our news flow as well. And then if you'd like to purchase shares, you can do so again in Canada under the ticker CNX on the Toronto Venture Exchange, and then the U.S. under CLLXF on the OTC.
Fantastic, Max. I want to thank you for being on the show. Max Porterfield, everybody. Max, I want to encourage you to keep using the gifts and talents you've given of intuition and foresight, taking a visionary approach to the macroeconomics of all things metals and taking Calinex to the next level and helping people create and preserve more wealth in the metals. Thank you so much for being on the show. And I also want to thank our listeners for listening to another episode of the Capital Gains Tax Solutions podcast. As always, we believe most high net worth individuals and those who help them, they struggle with clarifying their capital gains tax deferral options. Not having a clear plan is the enemy. And using a proven tax deferral strategy, such as the Deferred Sales Trust, to defer capital gains tax on the sale of gold or anything that's subject to U.S. capital gains tax, cryptocurrency, businesses, real estate, defer millions of dollars of capital gains tax. Check out capitalgainstaxsolutions.com and the Deferred Sales Trust. And you're also streaming on Expert CRE Secrets too. We appreciate all our listeners out there. And please rate, review, subscribe. Please share this with someone that can encourage. Please start practicing. I'm going to start practicing more meditation, right? It's good for the brain. It's good for your emotions. It's good for you making clear decisions. And I want to thank Max again for sharing that wisdom with us. And I hope everyone is